Hello, everyone. Can we hear me? Can I get a thumbs up from my co-host that I'm being heard? Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to this ArtsQuest at Home program, Movie Talk, The Empire Strikes Back. We're so excited to have you here with us tonight to talk all things Star Wars. Real quick, if this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you're coming back, thanks so much. If you'd like to, we have artsquest.org/donate if you feel like making a donation for this programming. If not, we are just so glad to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us again. And also just check out ArtsQuest at Home. There's so much going on there. These movie talks, we've got comedy shows, there's salsa dancing classes, truly so much to do. So, but before you go check that out, stick around here for a while and talk about Star Wars. I'm going to introduce to you our host for tonight. He's got so much movie knowledge, as you can see by the wall of DVDs behind him. Please give a warm wave to Anthony DeSanctis.
They're all muted.
Yep.
I'm going to assume they waved.
Yep.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of our movie talk on the Star Wars trilogy, arguably one of the greatest trilogies ever made, if not the greatest trilogy ever made. I feel, apart from my two co-hosts here in the sense that I actually don't have any Star Wars attire on. I have a shirt, but it's in the wash. So instead, I will drink this Star Wars out of this Star Wars coffee mug that when there's hot coffee in it, the lightsabers appear.
That's
and when
so fun.
When it's cold, it goes down. You can't run this to the dishwasher, otherwise it stops working. So.
Oh, and Lero's got a mug too.
Yes. All right. So, before I start, you have both seen Empire Strikes Back, right?
Rewatched it today.
Okay, good, great. Micah, of course you've seen it. Yeah. All right, so this movie has a reputation for being one of, if not the greatest sequels ever made. A lot of people say this is a sequel that actually tops the original, and Star Wars is a phenomenon of itself, the original film, A New Hope. And yeah, a lot of people say this one blows that out of the water. You were striking lightning twice. So anyway, I'm going to get my screen up. Make sure I have the right thing, and we will get this bad boy going.
And I'll just say while Anthony's getting that together, if you have questions at any time during the presentation, you can message over to Lero. Say hi, I'm Michael Lero.
Hello.
So he's right there. He's our co-host and also Star Wars aficionado and genius, knows it all. So just send those questions over and he'll make sure to voice those to Anthony and we can talk that way.
All right, you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so after the unprecedented success of the original Star Wars film in 1977, George Lucas was able to move on to the two sequels he had planned when he was making this first movie. As I mentioned before, he wrote a treatment that basically kind of was about 200 pages, and he took the first act of that and, made a standalone film in Star Wars. If you really think about it, the original Star Wars film, this one right here, can technically stand alone. If no Star Wars movies came after it, it is just an awesome 2 hours. A lot of movies today, I feel, make the mistake of they try and set up a trilogy ahead of time in the first movie, and then the first movie flops, and then you don't get these sequels. Whereas A New Hope really does stand alone. Yes, it's great that they continue on, but you could just watch this movie, understand everything, and it has a start, a middle, and an end, and it's kind of a perfect conclusion. So, anyway, so George Lucas was able to make, he was given creative control to do whatever he wanted. The first rule of making a film is, and they say this in The Producers when it comes to Broadway shows, is never put your own money into a show. But George did. Believe it or not, the Star Wars trilogy is actually, the original trilogy, they are independently made films. This movie was made from a combination of money that George Lucas made from the profits of the original film and money he got from a loan from a bank. So he got $18 million to make The Empire Strikes Back. Oops, my bad. I forgot. At first, there was the Star Wars Holiday Special. That was what George Lucas chose to happen after A New Hope. That was a CBS television broadcast that was ripped apart by critics, and George Lucas has since disowned. It never happened. It's not in Star Wars canon, but you can find a bootlegged copy of it on YouTube. So definitely check it out. It's crap. It's a blast, I won't deny. Basically, Han and Chewie go on an adventure to the Wookiee to basically the Wookiees, they celebrate a thing called Life Day. So basically it takes you through an exploration of Life Day. But yeah, it's hot garbage. Basically, Lucas wanted to take the sequel into a new direction from the first movie. You know, with that one, you get the excitement, you introduce your characters. He wanted to dive deeper into them, go a bit darker. The second film in the trilogy was always supposed to be the darkest. So, you know, he wanted to, it was a chance to really explore the characters a bit more, as you do. I think this is the film that probably, like, this is going to sound weird to say, but like, you spend the most time with the characters and then you really get to know who they are. You hear their dialogue and their interaction with each other because, you know, they're not so much on the run shooting at people. I mean, they are, but not to the extent that, you know, happens in other films. This one, it really feels lived in. You get to understand who they are a bit more. All right, so Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back is also known today as Episode 5 in a 9-part Skywalker saga. We have the prequel trilogy of 1 through 3. The original trilogy are now 4 through 6, and then the sequel trilogy are 7 through 9. And I said this last week, I say this again. Basically, with the Skywalker saga, each trilogy technically focuses on a Skywalker from the next generation. So you have Anakin in the original. Of course, he's in this trilogy, but it focuses more on Luke. And then in the sequel trilogy, you focus more on Kylo Ren or Ben Solo, who is a Skywalker through Leia. Anyway, so Empire Strikes Back. So George Lucas started drafting this scripts for this in 1978. This movie came out in 1980. So he started working with a science fiction author named Lee Brackett on the first few drafts of the film. She unfortunately passed away from cancer in 1978. So he then took on the next few drafts himself. Basically, what he was trying to figure out is where to go forward with this in the sense that he wanted Luke to continue on with his training as a Jedi. So he had to introduce a new character to be a Jedi, to be a Jedi Master, to train him, which is where we get Yoda. We'll go into the characters a bit more in a bit, character by character. He also wanted to go a bit more into Han Solo's past, so he introduced a friend from his past, Lando. He wanted a scene with the Emperor. And of course, we will get into one of the greatest twists in movie history, one of the greatest reveals, and I'll go more into how that came to be in a bit. But he also wanted to go bigger. There were 60 sets for this film. This film cost $18 million to make, did end up going over budget, as all of George Lucas's Star Wars movies do. This did go over budget to $33 million, but in the end, they pretty much tripled their money. And George Lucas was able to give all of his coworkers bonuses. So, good man. Anyway, we're going to move on here. This is the creative team behind the film. That is George Lucas in the center. To the left is Irvin Kershner. Irvin Kershner actually directed this film. George Lucas was busy setting up ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, starting out a company. And had some other personal stuff going on, so he couldn't invest himself in this movie the same way he could with the last movie. So Irvin Kershner was a professor of his, actually directed this film, and basically Kershner, when he was first offered the role, when he was first offered the job, turned it down because he didn't know how to make big budget special effects films. And Kershner's agent said, "Where are you, nuts? You're gonna make the sequel to the biggest movie of all time." So Kershner said yes, but he was known more for like character-driven dramas. There's an incredible movie on the Criterion Channel, if anybody has that, called The Eyes of Laura Mars. That is what he's really known for. It's a fantastic movie. And Irvin Kershner said he was up for the challenge because he really wanted to get to the heart of Luke's soul in this movie. And to the right is Lawrence Kasdan. Lawrence Kasdan would then go on to write Return of the Jedi. He co-wrote Force Awakens, and he wrote Solo. He also, did The Big Chill. He wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark, which he actually wrote before this movie, despite it coming out afterwards. So he understands what George Lucas wants. So this was the creative team behind The Empire Strikes Back. And maybe that's part of the reason that this film is so well acclaimed, is because, look, George Lucas is a visionary. He's a genius. But he does have faults. He's not the best with dialogue. He's not. The prequel trilogies will prove that to you. As in Episode 3, you hear Padme say to Anakin, "Hold me like you did by the lake on Naboo when there was nothing but our love." It's a cringeworthy moment. Anyway, this movie, dialogue's incredible. And again, George Lucas, faster, more intense, that's his go-to. The man is a visionary. He knows storytelling, but sometimes in the directing, directing and writing, he sometimes needs help. And these two, I think the three of them together came together and made an incredible film. So, as they were getting ready to shoot, Mark Hamill actually got into a car accident and had some serious damage to his face. There were scars. So this is still of him from each film in the trilogy. If you'll notice, he does look a bit different. I mean, not like disfigured or anything, but some of the scarring you see from the center image from Empire Strikes Back, some of that scarring was not makeup put on for the film. Some of that is actually from the accident he had. But basically, like, there have been, people have said, there have been rumors and all that this scene at the beginning when he is attacked by the Wampa was an excuse to, show why Mark Hamill has these scars on his face. But no, they were basically, the way Lucas assumed is that people would just assume, he'd been busy fighting, with the rebels and all that basically he just got it over time. And, thank God Mark Hamill survived his accident, but George Lucas said had he passed away, he would have been prepared to write a new character in. But thank God that did not happen. Yeah. So, in addition, they also managed to, go more into the end of animatronics and miniatures. And what they did now, instead of green screens to make things a bit easier for certain scenes like this, is they actually had a man come in and paint backdrops. And these would be, pretty large size paintings, and they would just shoot along that. So a lot of the scenes you see on Hoth in the snow, paintings, and it works incredibly. You would honestly never know. Okay, we also get to meet a few new characters. We meet Lando on the left, one of the coolest men in the galaxy, played by the always awesome Billy D. Williams. To your right, you have who, despite his limited screen time, has become easily like one of the most popular Star Wars characters. This is Boba Fett. Boba Fett, actually, believe it or not, was originally introduced in the Star Wars Holiday Special. Yes, that thing. And here he's the bounty hunter. You learn later on in the prequels that he is in fact a clone of his father, Jango Fett, who was the source of all of the clones that originally started off as clone troopers, and they became stormtroopers, and then somehow through the sequel trilogy and all that, you also get new people becoming stormtroopers. So with the special editions, with the Blu-ray release of these, the DVD release in 2004 and the Blu-ray release in 2011, they actually redubbed the actor that played Boba Fett originally with the voice of Tamara Morrison, who plays Jango Fett in the prequels, to kind of tie them more together. He only has a couple lines in this film, but he is very memorable. They also do digitally insert him into Star Wars: A New Hope. In the special editions that came out in 1997, they did add a scene in where Han Solo talks to Jabba the Hutt after he kills Greedo. That's not Greedo. Anyway, they do add a scene in where Jabba the Hutt talks to Han Solo, and basically they just inserted this scene in because technically Jabba the Hutt is working for, technically Boba Fett is working for Jabba the Hutt to get Han Solo because he has that debt to him. So there were potentially two other times, depending on how you watch this, when Boba Fett could have been introduced. But The Empire Strikes Back is his first official introduction to the world. And then, of course, we have the Emperor Palpatine, or Darth Sidious as he later becomes. He is technically the overarching villain of the entire Star Wars saga. I'm sorry, the movie, the Rise of Skywalker, Episode 9, has been out for a few months. I'll try and do my best to not spoil things, but he's in the movie, he's around, he's the villain. So when he was first introduced in Episode 5, he was played by a woman in a mask. I apologize, I forget her name, and voiced over by a British man named Clive Rewell. But there have been a lot of complaints about the Star Wars special editions and the changes Lucas would make in the future to his films. But one change that happened that nobody actually seems to be upset about is that in 2004, they put in Ian McDiarmid, who plays Palpatine in Return of the Jedi and the prequel trilogy and Episode 9. This actually makes everything flow better. The dialogue makes more sense too. They actually do change it because of the reveal later on that, Vader is Luke's father. They went back and reshot some of the when they shot this, They changed some of the dialogue. Even James Earl Jones came in and recorded new dialogue where basically they say when they're looking for Luke that he could be the son of Anakin Skywalker and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, this is a great change that actually nobody complained about, surprisingly, and there's lots to complain about with the changes they made to the original trilogy. And then, of course, the coolest puppet in movie history, Yoda. This was a unique achievement in movie puppetry, kind of the first of its kind. If this puppet doesn't work, then it just looks silly. And a big driving force of that also is Mark Hamill's performance with this puppet. This is Yoda, you know, the coolest 2-foot-tall, green, 900-year-old Jedi Master ever. So Yoda basically was created as a replacement for Obi-Wan Kenobi, who passed away, who sacrificed himself to, you know, let everybody else escape from the Death Star in A New Hope. So Yoda came in as the replacement to, you know, train Luke in his journey to become a Jedi Master. So this was an original concept for what Yoda could have looked like. He looks like a lawn gnome that you'd find outside your house. I'm glad that, you know, that design kind of perfected itself along the way. And then eventually, this was a mock-up drawing of closer to what he could look like. It's funny because, you know, Dobby came later on, but this kind of has more of a Dobby vibe from Harry Potter. But yeah, so this is a mock-up drawing, concept art for the film. This is Frank Oz, who was the puppeteer for Yoda, an incredible puppeteer. He also was responsible for the puppetry and the voice of Miss Piggy in The Muppets and Animal and a few others. He's worked with Jim Henson quite a few times. So he also has consistently been Yoda through this film, Return of the Jedi, the prequels, and has had a cameo in all of the sequel trilogy. In addition to, he does voice him in the Clone Wars as well. So yeah, this man is a staple of the Star Wars franchise. All right. This is a set of Dagobah where Yoda lives. What you see here is they actually had to make a set 5 feet off the ground so that Frank Oz could actually be underneath and move around, so that, you know, it made things easier for him to figure out how to make Yoda move. So that's why the set is lifted so high, so he has a way to get around. So, you know, again, as I mentioned before, if Yoda doesn't work, if Mark Hamill's performance with Yoda isn't believable. These two play off each other very well. Mark Hamill is basically acting with nothing. And it's funny because he did have an earpiece in to hear Frank Oz's lines, but, you know, it wasn't a great earpiece. And there were times Mark Hamill said that, like, if you turn the wrong way, you could pick up radio stations. He said, like, one time he heard the Rolling Stones in his ears and he couldn't hear any of Frank Oz's dialogue coming along. See the next slide. We'll get back to that in a second. So, yeah. So Mark Hamill also said at times that, you know, there were months when his name was the only one on a call sheet because he was acting with puppets. And, you know, he'd go to the set and the call sheet would just say, Hamill, Mark, and then that'd be the only actor called for the day. He said it got lonely at times. It was an emotional test, a mental test on him, but in the end, he's very proud of his performance in this film and his scenes with Frank Oz as Yoda. And Yoda is incredible. And I have to say, I'm 100% thrilled that with all the changes they make to the Star Wars trilogy, that George Lucas did later on, that they did not replace him with a CGI character, because I think that kills the spirit of the character for these films. You want to do it in the prequels? Sure, I get it. He jumps around a lot. He's great with a lightsaber. For this, the puppet works beautifully. And then, of course, Empire Strikes Back also dives into the relationship of Han Solo and Princess Leia. You know, in the first film, they kind of, you know, have some quippy dialogue back and forth, but it just kind of seems like they annoy each other. Whereas in this film, that is part of their attraction to each other. And basically, you get this iconic line that everybody remembers from the end of the film. It wasn't actually written that way. Originally, it was, I love you too. There were things where it was also, I love you, and then he would say, remember that when I get back. But the funny thing is that Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher were signed for sequels with the original film, but Harrison Ford was not. And he actually didn't know if he wanted to come back for this or return for a third film. So basically, you know, they kind of left the way basically Irvin Kershner said to him after multiple takes of him saying, I love you too, that it just wasn't in the spirit of Han Solo. So Irvin Kershner said to Harrison Ford, look, we're going to do this one more time. And what I want you to do is when I say action and she says, I love you, don't think about it. Just say what Han would say. And that's how this came to be. I love you. I know. One of the coolest lines in movie history. Han Solo, you're the man. Anyway, he then is frozen in carbonite, not to be seen again until 20 minutes into Return of the Jedi. But anyway, part of the reason they did this, again, was because Harrison Ford didn't know if he wanted to return for a third movie. He was signed contract. He was signed film by film. It was not a 3-film deal. And in addition, he also said in both this film and Return of the Jedi that he wanted to kill off Han Solo. He said that like he kind of felt like his character had run his course and that he wasn't important to the overall story. I would greatly disagree with him, and that he thought that sacrificing himself for his friends or that his death would show that nobody is safe. Having said that, the creative forces behind this completely disagreed with him, and they froze him in carbonite in the hopes that he would return for a third film. And if not, it's an easy way to write him off. But yeah, so it's funny because, you know, as The Force Awakens was coming out, episode 7, this movie's been out for 5 years now. I apologize, I'm going to spoil Force Awakens. As the film is coming out, I said to myself watching this, I'm like, I bet Han Solo dies in this movie. I bet part of the reason Harrison Ford agreed to come back is so that he could be killed off. Yeah, it's funny. You know, this is one of his most iconic characters. He's been trying to kill him off for years. I get it. And again, it's an insane moment in Force Awakens when he dies. Again, it shows nobody is safe. Like, I get his logic behind it. But did it hurt my soul when it happened? Of course it did. All right. We also get this incredible fight between Luke and Darth Vader. They finally face off against one another. And it's a great, great fight. And that leads us to one of the most iconic lines in movie history. You know, this real twist, one of the biggest twists ever. Darth Vader says, I am your father. Now, originally, when they were plotting this film, when Lucas was working with Lee Brackett, so Lee Brackett and Lawrence Kasdan share co-screenwriting credit for this film. When they were working out plot points for this film, originally Anakin Skywalker was supposed to appear as a ghost at one point with Yoda to talk to Luke. Anakin and Vader were separate characters. That was a thing that was supposed to happen. And originally this film was called Episode 2. So eventually then what happened was, after a while, they thought of this twist and this reveal. And Lucas actually created a backstory for this film. He created a backstory for Anakin Skywalker when making this film and this reveal. And, you know, he came to the backstory that Anakin was a student of Obi-Wan Kenobi and that the Emperor turned him. And that one by one, Anakin hunted down Jedi and killed them, and that he had a child, and the child had to be hidden from Vader, and that Anakin and Obi-Wan would have a fight on a volcano-like planet that would end with Obi-Wan winning and horribly disfiguring Anakin, which would need him to have a breathing apparatus. Does that all sound familiar? Well, it is, because that is basically the concept that put together the prequel trilogy. You know, the prequel trilogy. Love it or hate it, you know, effects galore. The prequel trilogy, that is basically it. And as I mentioned before, the Skywalker saga, if you piece together episodes 1 through 6, you do get the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so basically that, during the plotting The Empire Strikes Back, episode 5, as he then decided to call it, he pieced together a rough outline of the prequel trilogy. I'm sure he wasn't sitting on these exact 3 films for 20 years, but basically, you know, I'm sure he had an outline of what he wanted to get to. The film, they finished shooting it, they edited it together, and, you know, this at the time was probably the most anticipated movie ever. I mean, you know, when you think about it, like, this is the sequel to what was then the highest grossing film ever made, quite possibly the most popular film ever made. The original Star Wars film is, if you adjust for inflation, the second highest grossing movie ever made, behind only Gone with the Wind. So this film comes out, you know, sequels are typically a letdown. And as I mentioned before, it's tough to, you know, strike lightning twice. But this film did. It surpassed expectations, got rave reviews, and made so much money. If you adjust for inflation today, in the U.S., this is the 13th highest grossing movie ever made. Ever made. You know. So that is my presentation on The Empire Strikes Back. Next week, we will talk about Return of the Jedi. I'm going to stop my screen share now and come back to all of you. Please hold. Okay, I'm back.
So again, if any of you guys have questions or comments, do you want to send those over to Lero and he'll have us say them so we can talk about it. Also, if you want to turn on your screen and raise your hand, we can talk to you too. If you don't feel like doing that, that's okay as well. I mean, Anthony and me and Lero all have thoughts and feelings about the movie, so we're happy to talk to each other too.
So, Addison, what is your favorite part of the movie? Like, what's a scene you really remember?
It's hard. I really do I like when they finally meet with Lando. I don't know why that whole visual is very exciting. And I like the rapport between Han and Leia at that point. I think it really settles in then, and you're kind of that's when I start actually shipping them, I think. I think in the beginning Han's just too annoying still, and I'm no, I get it.
It's funny actually because there was an ad lib in that scene. So in the script, Lando puts his arm out and Leia takes it or is about to, but Harrison Ford thought in true Han fashion he would jump ahead and do it then to kind of one up Lando, and then that's how that came to be. But no, I think that's an awesome scene. Yeah, the three of them. Well, the two of them play well with each other, but you also see that Han and Lando have this friendly rivalry kind of going on. So yeah. Mike, what are those? Very nice.
He's so prepared. Can you just act out the whole movie with your Funko figures?
Most important characters.
Did you see, Addison, did you see Solo?
No.
Well, they show how also Han and Lando meet in that film, and it's pretty good. Donald Glover plays Lando, and he's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see it. I've not been avoiding Star Wars. I just,
I imagine it'll be on Disney Plus soon. Probably have contractual rights with other streaming services. But Mike, did I cut you off? My apologies.
No.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say it's funny that you mentioned that. I didn't know that about Mark Hamill's car accident, because I literally wrote down a note. Luke is hotter in this film, so I don't know. It worked for me.
Oh man!
Because of the stars?
Yeah, I don't know. I think his nose was shaped differently from the accident, and I don't know. I liked it.
Yeah, well, I guess it gave him a more rugged appeal.
Yeah, I do agree. So you're saying that it wasn't that scene in the beginning was added for that. It was just there?
No, there have always been false reports, but I did a lot of research on this, and no, it was, I saw a thing where George Lucas saying that that scene was always supposed to be there, and he just hoped people would assume Luke got scars from being part of the Rebel Alliance.
It's interesting because that scene, it does kind of set the mood. At the same time, that I was this didn't really move the plot at all. It didn't change anything. Yeah. They just went out and saved him, and then we're still back to where we need to be. But
so a scene that actually, let me ask your thoughts on both of this, because this happens as a cause of that scene. Now, they don't reveal it in this movie. So it doesn't get revealed to Return of the Jedi, but Luke and Leia kiss.
Yeah,
siblings.
I know.
Yuck.
Yeah, that's I was watching it, and my roommate, who's also working from home, was in the living room too. So they kissed, and I was like, and they're siblings. Yeah,
but they don't know they're siblings yet.
They don't know, and it is more of a just trying to make Han mad kiss, So it is more jokey to begin with. So
I never really thought that Luke had. It's kind of interesting because I don't really think Luke had ever had feelings for Leia romantically. Maybe at first, but I kind of feel like they had kind of through the Force. I think he just knew that they were closer, as friends than in a relationship. I mean, you could tell that he was more friends with Han and didn't want to get in the way of that. That's how I see that kind of body language between him. It's awkward for Luke. Leia does something.
It's funny though, because originally, so there's that line, when Luke leaves to go save his friends from Dagobah, and Obi-Wan says that boy was our last hope, and Yoda says no, there is another. That was always supposed to be Luke's sister, but it actually wasn't supposed to be Leia. Like, I was looking up on this. Like, Luke did have a sister. They were going to introduce her in Return of the Jedi. Her name was supposed to be, I'm going to butcher this, but it was like Nelith or something like that. Like, this was supposed to be a brand new character, which, makes the kiss more understandable. But what I'm saying is everything you've said makes sense. But if George Lucas knew while making Empire Strikes Back that Leia was Luke's sister, yuck.
Yeah.
It's almost a miracle how this movie, how any of these original trilogies came together so well, because a lot of the stuff that you talked about, Anthony, is ad-libbed kind of by chance. The director wasn't used to directing a movie of this caliber, but if you look at everything today, you look back at it and you go, well, that's incredible. They really did a lot of planning, but a lot of it just came up as they were doing it. They spent a lot of money and time on the sets, on the puppets, on all of the stop motion, but George Lucas, with his directing skills and writing skills, sometimes it was kind of like, what?
Yeah, like here's the thing, like George Lucas, the man's a visionary, like without question. And he always wanted free creative control, and he had that. But he also surrounded himself by people that could complement him. You know what I mean? I think that the problem with the prequels, I don't want to have like a long debate on this, but the problem with the prequels is that he had nobody on his creative team that would say, no, George, maybe this isn't a good idea. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. Whereas Lawrence Kasdan and with Irvin Kershner, yes, he didn't direct movies that were of this level, but if you're a good storyteller, you're a good storyteller. Like Taika Waititi, before he did Thor Ragnarok, did What We Do in the Shadows and The Hunt for the Wilder People. Like, they are different levels of scale of film. It's if you are a good director and a good storyteller, that's all that matters you can make anything. But yeah, it's just, he worked with people on these that complemented him well. Like, yes, he was the one driving the ship, but he had people that weren't afraid to stand up to him or share their input. Whereas I think he needed that on the prequels. And that's kind of why, like, regardless of the effects of it, like some of the story and the dialogue is just a bit, in my opinion. So, but yeah. Do we have any questions from anybody?
Oh, yeah, one came in over here just now from C. Smith. Do any of the ensuing movies discuss the fate of Cloud City after Empire Strikes Back? That's a really good question.
I don't know off the top of my head. I feel like I imagine in one of the movies they probably like have like a backdrop of it somewhere as kind of like an Easter egg or something. So, but I would have to go back and look. I don't believe so.
Kind of do. I can answer that a little bit. So
okay.
At the end of Return of the Jedi, in the re-released movie, they do have a cutscene during the celebration of people on Cloud City, so that kind of gives you assurance that they're okay.
Okay.
They do talk about Cloud City in a lot of the video games that are out. Best Spin the Planet that Cloud City's on. They do mention that several times. It's kind of insinuated that they kind of make it out of it all right. I guess though, if not to spoil the new movie, Lando's in a different spot in that movie. So the fate of him and what he did on Cloud City, I guess we don't really know too much about.
No, that makes sense to them putting that there also. I was thinking it had to be something like that, because I know like when they did those changes for that scene, they also add in like Coruscant and the Gungans and all that, like it probably is a good way to tie everything up to say, hey, we're all good, but trying to think.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Mike? Did I cut you off?
That's a very good question.
Yeah. Addie, do you have anything?
I'm looking at my notes. I haven't gotten any questions. I'm trying to look at what I want to talk about. Just funny anecdote. This is probably going to drive both of you guys nuts, but I saw Toy Story 2 before I ever saw this movie. So, I don't know, that was a fun realization this morning that like, oh, yeah, I got that weird spoiler in that way.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a funny thing. A lot of movies and things pay homage to. Um,
yeah.
there's actually Mark Hamill played a character called the Trickster on The Flash back in the 90s. It
Hmm.
was a TV show, got canceled after a season. They brought it back. Everybody knows this one now with Grant Gustin as Barry Allen. But anyway, Mark Hamill actually came back as his character. And in it, I think his son breaks him out of jail in the thing. And Mark Hamill says to the kid, he says, "I am your father." Yeah, so,
Yeah.
but no, I think also Pixar actually came to be from Lucasfilm. I don't know if you knew that, but like they
Mhm.
tried to start a company in the 80s, some things failed. They tried to make Howard the Duck a thing, and somehow through all of this and Apple failing at something, Pixar came to be. It was
Huh.
like Lucasfilm. I don't know the full details, but it was like Lucasfilm, Apple, something separated, something, Pixar was born.
Mhm.
So if anybody knows the real information on that,
And
please feel free to correct me.
they all end up in the Disney IP.
Um, what do you think of Yoda as a puppet? I mean, I still think today, even like movies made 80, 40 years later, I still think the puppet is great. Like,
Well, I think like too, like in general, puppets I think can be brought back even more in film. Like I think there's like a tendency to go CGI, but there's something more lifelike about like a human is operating it. So I think there is kind of that like magic in it when you can have a puppet versus CGI. Like you said, like sometimes it makes more sense, of course, to do CGI depending what you need, but there's something you can really like believe in a puppet that you
yeah,
can't get from CGI.
yeah. I mean, like that's part of the thing I like about the sequel trilogy is they do a lot of practical things. There are a lot of puppets in there, and it's
Hmm.
funny that we say this because a lot of critiques of the prequel trilogy are that they are effects galore and all that. But the funny thing is those are closer to what George Lucas's vision of Star Wars was. Like if the original trilogy came out in the 90s and the 2000s, it would have looked more like the prequels. So it's
Yeah.
funny because a lot of people bash him for going further into his vision. Um, whereas, is it weird that the prequels suddenly have all of this technology and it looks like a giant population is there, and then in the original trilogy, they're not there? You know what I mean? Like it just kind of seems like the population has died down quite a bit. But I don't know. The moral of the story is practical works better for me.
Yeah.
Could probably tie that into the fact that the Empire was just there and was hard. That was the ruling body, and what they said went. So
Mhm.
that was the golden age of the Republic and the prequels, and
Hmm.
that was stripped away. What was left was Emperor Palpatine and his rule, and he said what was good and what was bad. So you probably saw all kinds of different decrease in population and technology was certain things weren't allowed. It's kind of real world here. Like,
Hmm.
if you think of it that way.
Yeah. Okay. So, in terms of sequels outdoing the original, do you find this is a better movie than A New Hope?
I would say so. Yeah. I like A New Hope a lot, but this one, like you said, I think is more character driven.
Mm.
And so, yeah, you get to know them all a little more. And I like the scenery. Like the Cloud City is just like very satisfying to look at. And then that contrasted with, I'm blanking on Yoda's planet or house, but
Dagobah.
yeah, like it's just such stark contrasts of places, which is cool to see, and they're both done really well that you can really picture those worlds. So whereas the first one, obviously, like it's Star Wars, people picture space, but I like being able to see the different planets in those different worlds. I think is my favorite part of Star Wars.
Mm. Mike.
No, I agree. I think that they had in the Empire Strikes Back, it had a little bit of everything for every type of
Mm-hmm.
audience member. It had a little bit of romance. It had a little bit more action in terms of a real lightsaber battle.
Yeah.
You got to see Han with the Millennium Falcon in action going through the asteroid field, and bounty hunters. The universe is way bigger than what you originally thought from
Mm-hmm.
In A New Hope. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anthony, we did have a question come in. I mean, this is just kind of a funny one, but in Clerks, did the production crew have to pay extra to the Star Wars franchise for mentioning The Empire Strikes Back in their script?
No.
Free advertising.
Oh man. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, in many ways of the three movies, like this might be the slowest of the three just because there's not as much in your face action. But at the same time, like I'm totally good with that. This is never a boring movie by any means. Like,
Yeah, I think this feels faster than A New Hope.
Yeah,
I think
really?
because they're constantly changing locations and plot lines and they're bouncing around a little more. So
That's interesting. What you feel, Anthony feels it's a little slower, but Addie feels it's a little faster.
I mean,
do you think it's just right, Mike? That would round it out.
It's just right. So yeah, I'll round it up.
Is this the best? Okay, so this might be this is a more of a broad question, and if not, we won't have a debate on if you say something else. Is this the best sequel ever made?
I'll say yes because I want to say that when you compare we can say Pirates of the Caribbean because that's another Disney IP. So Pirates of the Caribbean. You look at Lord of the Rings. Harry Potter's a little different, but those were movies that had the rule of three. I didn't like the second Pirates movie. I didn't really like the second Lord of the Rings movie, and I don't really know many people that do like the second Lord of the Rings movie for some reason. They're good movies, but they're generally a little bit slower paced. It's kind of like a filler movie where the plot points are, they're going to make a third movie. You started this whole thing, Anthony, by saying this is a movie that stands on its own. You don't need anything before it or after it. And that's kind of what makes this really good. It is kind of, it's left with a cliffhanger, but, at the same time, it was paced well. It had good character development. So I think it is probably the best sequel ever made compared to the movies that, they do today.
I mean, I think the difference between this and Lord of the Rings is that, like, with Lord of the Rings, it was all shot at one time. So, it's going to feel like filler. Whereas I'm sure George Lucas wanted to make a sequel after Empire Strikes Back. But I think like this and like The Dark Knight and Godfather Part 2, like you focus on the movie you have and you put everything you can into it and just hope you get a sequel down the line. You know what I mean? Like, I think you have to treat this movie like it's the last one. I think that's the logic in my head going forward.
I would say, hot take, this is the second best sequel of all time because the best sequel is Toy Story 2. To go back to that, similar plots, but
I see your Toy Story 2 and I raise you a Toy Story 3. So.
I love Toy Story 2. I think that one just is a great film. And again, I mean, they based it off of a lot of this, but it's still great. So
yeah. Well, I think we can agree though that like in terms of overall trilogies, like this, and I'll say Toy Story 1 through 3. I like 4 a lot, I do, but 1 through 3 to me are golden. So you have these, the best trilogies. So yeah, but I think it's also funny in that if you look at, a lot of times, as you said, Mike, Two Towers, like that's the second movie in a trilogy. A lot of times the second movie can be the weakest because, yeah, again, you're not starting something, you're not finishing something. But this is one of those rare times where I would say the second film in a trilogy is the strongest. Like the Dark Knight, like Godfather Part 2. Like it's just one of those times when, you strike lightning twice, you focus on what you have, and you pray there's more. But
for the record, Deborah Carlino agrees with you. Empire Strikes Back is the better sequel, but A New Hope was brilliant. We agreed.
They're all brilliant. All three movies are masterpieces. So, Empire Magazine, it's like an entertainment magazine in England, maybe all more than England, maybe all of Europe, who knows? But they made a list. They do it every couple of years of like their greatest movies ever made. It is a bit more of a fan magazine, so you're not going to get a lot of your Godard films and, Kurosawa and all that. But for them, Empire was the #1 film of all time, I believe. They made a list in 2017. So,
okay.
Yeah, and it's I believe like number 8 or 9 on IMDb's top 250 of all time, voted on by us. So yeah, if you have
Cool.
if you have an IMDb profile, you can go on and vote. But yeah, I just find this film, it's deep. It goes into the character. Like you don't see. I kind of just feel like you appreciate the characters more in this film, and you learn more about them. And it's almost like they don't touch on it. Then Return of the Jedi, certain character aspects. Like I'm grateful for this film because this makes me appreciate Luke Skywalker as Luke Skywalker more. You know, like, I understand his motivations completely. And I would rather a million films like this than Phantom Menace. So, yeah.
I just got a compliment on my Leia buns. Thank you, Jean. I'm glad you noticed them.
You asked Addie about her favorite scene. I had a little bit more time to think about my favorite scene, and it's probably not what you'd think, but in this movie, it's got one of the best Millennium Falcon chase scenes. Well, when they're escaping from Hoth, I really love that scene because John Williams scores it great. You got C-3PO being comic in his own little way. Chewie, who's along for the ride and, is backing his friend. And then Leia, who's just like, this is a bad idea, but ultimately it works.
Yeah. I mean, Leia is so fun in that scene.
Great chase scene. It is a great chase scene. And a lot of people talk about like cars, movies that have car chase scenes. This is a great chase scene in a movie.
Oh, yeah. Also, apparently, Star Wars movies, in the Star Wars universe, they have their own language for swearing. Leia calls Han a scruffy-looking nerf herder.
Yeah.
So, and then he says, "Who's scruffy-looking?" But
yeah. I want to point out, I love too. What is it? Both Han and Lando, when things go wrong, keep yelling, "It's not my fault!" And I love that. I love that Leia has to deal with these men that she's just handle it, all right?
I think for me, my favorite scene is in the training scene on Dagobah. I like when Luke faces the dream Vader that ends up being himself. That to me, I just enjoyed. And again, now, understanding more of what went into making that whole training sequence and the issues with puppets and all that, to me, it's even more incredible. So
yeah.
And I also like Yoda hitting R2-D2 with a stick. So
yeah, I like that a lot. Cool. Well, do we have any last questions to round us out?
I have nothing over here.
All right. Well, Anthony, do you want to tell them when to tune in next for episode 6?
Yes, tune in next week for episode 6, Return of the Jedi, next Tuesday at 7:30, where we will go into the concluding chapter in this trilogy, or episode 6 in the concluding chapter of the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker, or we get 2/3 of the way through the Skywalker saga. There's a lot of movies, is the moral of the story. So, yeah. But this one has a lot of Muppets in it, and I'm very excited to talk about them. Salacious Crumb as a child gave me nightmares for years. That little thing was so creepy.
Awesome.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so tune into that, everyone, so we can keep talking about this. Who knows what hairstyle I'll have then? So, gotta stay on your toes. Also, if you want something completely different, tomorrow, Anthony and I are doing a movie talk on the film Mary Poppins. So, more stuff you can watch. Also, if there's any Spanish speakers among us, myself and Joanne Garcia, who also works at ArtsQuest, we're going to be doing a Spanish movie talk on the first episode of the Netflix series Elite on Netflix. So you can watch that and have a Spanish talk with us. So that's for native speakers and people who speak it as a second language. So if you want to tune into that, that's tomorrow as well. And so much more. You can go to artsquest.org at home to see all of the at-home programming we've got going on. And again, if you enjoyed this tonight and you want to make a donation, any amount is greatly appreciated, and you can go to artsquest.org/donate to do that. But now I'm going to do a thing here. I'm going to unmute all of your mics real quick so you can give both Anthony and Lyra a round of applause. So I'm going to be doing that in 3, 2, 1. Yay!
Yay.
Oh, thank you.
Yay! Thanks, everyone. And again, thanks to Anthony and Lero for this awesome presentation. I hope you guys will join us next time for episode 6. And have a great night. Stay safe, stay home, stay strong through this time, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye!